I did not have time to play with that other system like I thought I was going to. By the time I finally like got settled in last night, it was like 9 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, hey, I'm not doing anything else. Just I'm tired of being stressed and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, I was falling asleep on the couch.
It's a good feeling when you can just fall asleep on the couch, though. Like when you finally just get to a point you're just like, you know what? I'm done. I'm just gonna.
Yeah. Didn't really want to be, but I did.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that tired, but I was. Yeah, them's the breaks.
Well, and it doesn't help that I spent like 3 hours in the gym yesterday morning, so which was nice. I enjoyed it because I wasn't pressed for time, and so I could just kind of take my time and do the exercises I wanted to do all at once without having to, go to the gym in the morning to do part of it, to do like the cardio part, and then come back at night. And my husband and my friend Paul have decided that I am a gym rat now, as they have started lovingly. See, I don't think that that's a fair assessment. Like, I don't like that phrase.
Yeah. It's a tagline of pride, as far as I'm concerned.
I'm going to take it. I'm going to take it and run with it. Like I told Raj, I was like, this is like, it has become equal parts like meditation and therapeutic, which is something I never kind of experienced or expected it to be. And I realize I'm totally sounding like a gym bro right now. So, my bad, but
no, that's not gym bro talk, man. Is totally different from that. Let me tell you.
Okay. Maybe I just haven't been around enough gym bros to, and maybe I should keep it that way. But like, dude, like the routine I have is like, there's like yoga involved, there's stretching, calisthenics, weights, running. It's nice. And when I can get in there and just kill some time, and focus on, what I'm doing in the moment. So there's actually this theory, or not, theory is maybe the wrong word, but, a while back I was going to a therapist just to, felt like checking in to check on me. And she was telling me and explaining to me about this concept, called body scanning. It's like meditation, except instead of like trying to clear your mind and separate yourself, you focus intently on a like part of your body. And you start at your feet and you work your way up. So like, as you're being very quiet and you're centering yourself, you think about wiggling your toes, and you wiggle your toes, and then you talk like flex your foot. And so you check in with like each part of your body and you work your way up. And it's just like, it walks through your whole body, and it's called body scanning. And it doesn't do anything. And it's similar to meditation, except that it does, like I said, it makes you focus on just the minute parts of your body to check in with yourself. And like, that is a really cool concept. And it doesn't take long, but it really does like center you in the moment. And it is very, I don't know the word. It is very helpful to me, to do that, not for no other reason than to just like get me like in the here and now, like what's happening with my body. How do I feel, through each part of me.
Interesting.
So yeah, it's really cool. So I've been trying to doing that once a day and stuff. So, but all that's just neither here nor there. That's just part of me trying to be a better me.
It's good. Yeah. It's always a good energy. What am I trying to say? It's a good goal to have. There you go.
Yeah. Like, I've dedicated a lot of my like external energy, stuff with the van, stuff with my day-to-day life, like the things that I do. I've dedicated a lot of that to being, a better version of me than I was yesterday. That's kind of the way I look at things. And so now I'm like taking that same concept and ideology and focusing on like the physicality of myself. Not to mention the sex is great. Like fit people sex is a whole different ballgame.
Yep.
Not that the sex wasn't good before, but I'm just saying, man, it's been great. Like I walk in the room and Roger gets that glint in his eye and it's on and popping. But nobody else wants to hear that, not even you. But what they do want to hear about?
Hopefully some comic books.
I think they want to hear about some comic books. This is episode 216 of the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. As usual, I am glad to be here, and my name is Caleb Alexander McKenzie, for those of you who don't know me.
I'm Matt Trogdon.
Welcome. How's your morning going so far, buddy?
It's good. It's nice, clear, sunny day, man.
Yeah.
These are nice before it gets hot here in the South.
kind of quiet, crisp mornings. I could, in a perfect world, I could bump the temperature up about 5 to 7 degrees, but not much. But other than that, yeah, like I sat out on the back deck this morning for a little bit, just watching the dogs play, and it was peaceful. Yeah, I liked it.
Got to take advantage of those.
Plus, I did the adult thing this past week, and I looked out at my backyard and I said, "Oh, there's leaves lying about. I should fix that, and I need to do some cleaning up." So I did what every functioning adult did. I paid men to come clean my yard. So my backyard is nice. I need to plant some flowers and do some yardscaping, but other than that, my happy place is coming together. Which is great, because that's where I spend a lot of time reading my comics during the spring and summer. Comics such as the one that you're going to tell me about right now. Drop 3 things that you read this week on me, brother. I want to hear about them.
3 things that I read, starting off with DC Comics. This is number 2 of 10, Batman the Knight. This is from writer Chip Zdarsky. The creative team, the rest of the creative team on this is, it's listed in this comic book somewhere. Just got to find that credits page, which I can't find right now. Jesus Christ.
Dude, they put it in a different place in every comic.
I cannot find there we go. Art and cover by Carmine D. Giandomenico. So this is, again, this little mini series is about, maxi series, whatever, is about the early formation days of Bruce Wayne becoming Batman. And then, we started off in issue 1. He was a very young man of, say, 10 years old. Now he's a teenager, late teens, and he is absconded off to Paris to learn how to move about the city at night in stealth. And he happens upon a very notorious and successful cat burglar, and takes up to learn from her. And he has internal struggles with that because she's a criminal. But there's a big reveal at the last page of somebody important in Batman's past. So It's great. I mean, it's very good, very good. It's a little bit oversized book. It's a $5 book. Again, I've really got to be sold to buy a $5 book every month, and this one's got me. Also, on my short stack from Marvel, Hulk number 4. This one is, of course, by Donny Cates and Ryan Otley. And, Cliff Rathburn is the inker. The color artist on this is a little different. Frank Martin is the color artist. And up till now, it's been Frank Martin and Federico Blee. And I did notice the colors looked a little different on this issue.
Okay.
It wasn't radically different, but I was like, this feels different. So I actually went back and looked at the credits from previous issues. And yep, sure enough, there's only half the colorist team on this one that there had been. But this series is wacky, man. It's just going for it. This is comic book stuff, man.
Yeah.
Just wacky. But I really like it. It's fun. But this is gruesome. There's a lot of bloody, gruesome violence in this book. And it's interesting to see that in a mainstream Marvel title.
Well, I think if you like I've come to just kind of expect that from the artist that's on the book. Like that's just kind of part and parcel of what he does.
Yeah. Well, he's doing it. And then thirdly on my short stack is Maniac of New York, The Bronx is Burning by Elliott Kahn and Andre Muti. Man, I want to know, they've hooked me for this story. The antagonist in this story, I've got to find out what the hell is going on with the antagonist in this story, the Maniac. Why is he doing this? What's driving him? Who is it? How are they going to stop him? It's interesting because this is like anything but a complicated, layered story. It's very simple. There's a murderous maniac in New York, but what's going on with him? It's like, it's very Jason Voorhees, but you don't know the Jason Voorhees backstory type with this. There's no backstory. It's just, so yeah, as simple as this little story is, it's got me hooked, and I got to find out how this wraps up. I got to find out what this character's motivation is. I just hope they don't stretch it out too long.
What publishing company is that coming out of? Is that Image?
That's Aftershock.
Oh, okay, Aftershock. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you said that or not. I was trying to remember where it came out of. So I'm not reading that book, but man, I love looking at Andrea Moody's art. Like that dude, everything about it is just pretty. He did that book with Cullen Bunn not too long ago. I think it was Parasomnia that he was on with Cullen. And it's stunning work, man. Like such a good artist.
Very unique artist, very unique look to his work.
Yeah.
You're not going to mistake him for somebody else.
No, not at all. Like you see him and he like, it's almost like a signature, which is cool, which is what I want from comic artists. I'm actually like, I don't know, man. I'm becoming kind of adverse to the idea of like a quote unquote house style. I think we have such a range in comic art now. And even in the big two books, like I want to see art that delivers. I want to see art that grabs me. I don't want to just see art that, just tells a story that overlooks artistic impersonation and impersonation. So like I look for that kind of signature in an artistic style. Other than that, I mean, it just looks like something that you could have given to, like a production company to do, kind of like manga. And I'm going to say that, and people are who that's not a dismissal of manga. Like it, I read manga, I like manga, but in a lot of cases they just like, other than just like the main lines, they give the manga to a production company because they're putting them out weekly and they don't have time to embellish everything. And that's what house style feels like to me. And there's so many good artists out there that I'm like, yeah, no, like I need to see an identifier. I want art that identifies the artist, that is purely that artist. So it's just cool stuff. But speaking of one of those artists, there are quite a few in my little short stack. You mentioned Donnie Cates. He is writing another book that I'm a big fan of. That's the first book up on my short stack. I don't remember if you're reading this or not, but it's Redneck. Series has been around for a minute. It was one of Donnie Cates's main titles before he jumped over and started like mainlining and head streaming at Marvel. He's doing this book with Lissandro Esterin and Dee Cunafe, who is the colorist on the book. Stylistic as hell. It's beautiful. It's rough. It almost looks like they took and just splashed colors on a page and then covered it with like that black chalk stuff. And Lissandro Esterin's just like he's painting it by knocking off chunks of that color. This is a vampire story based out of Texas. In fact, this is the last arc of it. The current issue that I just read is issue 32. Things are kind of culminating. They're coming to a head. This is going to make it to, I think, 36. Yeah, it's got 36 issues total. So we got 4 issues left. It's been a hell of a ride. The Bartlett family, which is what they are. They're a very tight knit family, except for Grandpa, who might be the original Vlad the Impaler. We're just kind of learning these things. They are dealing with family issues that could affect the end of the world out of Texas. So cool little vampire story. Second on the short stack, again, one of these artists that I dearly love. I've got art hanging by them on my wall, I should say, because it's a team. And this comes out of Dark Horse Comics. It's Apache Delivery Service. This is written by Matt Kent, drawn by Tyler Jenkins, with colors and a little ink assist by Hillary Jenkins. Man, I love Tyler and Hillary Jenkins. Anytime you get to end a day by looking at their art, it's phenomenal. In this particular story, it is reminds me a lot of MGMT, Mind Management, that Matt Kent did way back in the day. So essentially, you've got it is the Vietnam War and the Vietnam era. They are looking for lost gold that was taken and hidden by the Japanese army. In fact, it's Nazi gold. That when World War II ended, a ship was coming back from smuggling Nazi gold to Japan, and it got lost. Somebody, as I use air quotes to do that, somebody took it and hid it on an island. Well, in the midst of the Vietnam War, this young Navajo scout, actually, that's common misconception. Like that, it makes fun of the actual title of the book. They call him the Apache Delivery Service because he's just a tracker and just amazing, but he's actually a Navajo guy. He has sold his services, so to speak, to an individual who is looking for this gold. And they're just kind of like going on this treasure hunt in the midst of the Vietnam War, while things are going to hell around them. Really good, man. Really, really fun series. I'm digging the hell out of it. And at the end of it, they find themselves in the pits, so to speak, of the second issue. And then last, but certainly not least, and if you read the issue too, you're going to giggle when I say the in the pits part. That's a little pun that was well intended. Third book, from La Boom Studios. I didn't even plan this, but I completely stayed away from Marvel and DC in this. This is the third volume of Brian Azzarello and Maria Lovett's Faithless. I've spoken about Faithless multiple times on the show. I think for Craig and I, it was one of our favorite books a few years back. It is literally about an artist who makes the deal with the devil. It is graphic. It is sexual. It is sensual. It plays with all of sexuality. In this third issue, it kicks up where we left off. Faith, who is this artist who, again, has made a deal with the devil and is, knocking boots with the devil's daughter. Where we last left her, she was kind of down and out. She had a kind of a bad moment. Some things overwhelmed her, and she's basically sequestered herself inside the devil, who is this well-known art rep's interior studio. Well, a friend finds her. They connect. And they check on each other, and she's, very spaced out, but she's glad to reconnect with one of her friends. But this kind of offshoots, and the devil does not like people dabbling in his agenda, as you might expect. So he begins fucking with the friend, including, sending demons after the friend's kids. So this is going to get real hairy real quick. Again, Maria Lovett, outstanding artist, very loose, very interpretive, very sexy. I'm going to hold this up, and of course our listeners can't see it, but this book, because of the sexual nature, it does kind of the same thing that Sex Criminals does or did, in that it you can get naughty covers. So I got the naughty cover with some little T&A action in there. But even in the interiors, this is not a book you want to buy your kids. There is some graphic depictions of sex in this book, coming from Boom Studios. So fun times all around. Just really, really beautiful work. But that's on my short stack. And if you want to see panels from some of these books, of course, not the dirty, that good. We won't put that up on our social media, but you can see panels of the other stuff that we liked on our social media pages. You can come join our Facebook group that we have on and pop in there. You can follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We're at SFG Podcast on both of those. Threw up a couple of panels last night while I was just sitting there reading the stuff that I find, intriguing, things that I think are hilarious in the moment, little sight gags, anything and everything, just to kind of celebrate the art. So we hope you follow us on there. Like us, talk to us in the comments. We'll chat back with you. So that's my little short stack. Covered nice. A lot of, just in those, we covered a lot of range, man. There's a lot of comics to be read. Yeah. Including some new ones. And we got together this week, as we are wont to do. We put our little noggins in the same spot, and we said, what do we want to read? And it turns out that what we wanted to read was this new little book that came out. That just treated us really, really well, or at least I can't speak for Matt. I won't say that. It treated me really, really well. Mainly because it's by an artist that I like, and it's by an artist that I've followed a little, for quite a while. And it's out of a publisher that I don't typically read. So I was kind of shocked when I saw the name on it. And that name is Viktor Santos. He is the artist who did the Polar series, which was later turned into a Netflix movie that I think did fairly well, but I enjoyed it. I thought it was great. But this new book from Behemoth Comics is called Until My Knuckles Bleed. So again, like coming out of Behemoth, when I mostly know him from Dark Horse, which is where I think the other stuff was published, it just kind of rocks me back on my heels. So I said, we need to check this out. Also, it's in a way different format. Most of the Polar stuff was in kind of because I think it was digital first, it was in kind of like a widescreen or a landscape format. This is in regular comic book format. So I decided that, I suggested that we check it out, and my buddy Matt here acquiesced. And so we did. And so I'm curious, Matt, what did you think about the book? How did it treat you?
I thought it was good. I really like the artwork in it. I specifically like the black and white artwork in it. Very obviously very reminiscent of Sin City.
Yep.
But I really like the book. I really like the story. The opening page made me laugh, really laugh. And we'll get into that and why. But yeah, I definitely give the book a thumbs up.
Now, have you read any Viktor Santos work before?
I don't believe so.
So I need to bring you some stuff because I think you would really dig it because like you said, it is his art style is reminiscent of that Frank Miller Sin City stuff, but it's like it would be that if it was filtered through Darwin Cook.
My thoughts exactly.
If that makes sense. So it's it is just stunning work. His artwork is beautiful. And again, like the Polar series that he did, and I should have grabbed it off my shelf, but I'll bring you a copy of that because you need to read it. You would enjoy it. It's really good. So man, I can't agree with you more. I thought it was wonderful. I have some complaints, but it's not about this book. It's about how I had to read the book, which we will get into later. It just a broader. It's going to be me bitching about comicsology, so you've got that to look forward to. But let's get into the meat potatoes of this, shall we?
Sure.
All right. So this is called yet again "Until My Knuckles Bleed" by Viktor Santos, and this is the first part. It looks like this is going to be obviously it's in a serialized format, but it looks like he's got it separated up into different chapters, so to speak. This is Extremely Damaged Part 1. And it starts you off by going into a flashback. And what you get on this first page, as Matt was alluding to, is this black and white image, like I said, very Frank Miller-esque homage to the 90s, which is where this main character he kind of peaked. At least you get the feeling of that, or at least he feels that way. He was part of a team. He was part of a superhero team made up of all kinds of people who are very, very drawn to be very 90s-esque. And one of them looks like a mixture of Domino and a Wildcat. I mean, this is this kind of extreme.
This is Youngblood.
Yeah, this is Youngblood. Yeah, just full out. And of course, that can't last forever, right? Like the team broke up and these people aged and went their separate ways. And now you've got you've got our main character working as essentially a bouncer at a strip club in Detroit. His job is to just be muscle and protect the girls and make sure nobody really bothers them as they do their job. And as you might imagine, it's not a very fulfilling job, especially, coming from somebody with his background where they were in the midst of brutality and saving the world and superheroics and what have you. And he's not paid very well. In fact, like he's, even to a point to where this job in and of itself is kind of making him feel some kind of way, maybe a little hypocritical, because he knows that the strip club is, at least under the thumb of the mafia. So like when he goes to his boss at one point, he's like, we talked about maybe me getting a raise. It would be nice, considering what I do here. And the manager's just like, look, that's not going to happen. You're a good guy. You're a hard worker and a great dude, but we're getting squeezed by these guys. And I just don't have the budget to do that. I'm sorry. To which, pisses him off. So he walks out just in time to see some schmuck bothering one of the dancers and getting up and, being drunk, dancing on the pole, and just proceeds to pummel this dude. And this dude just happens to be a rich asshole. So in the midst of finding out that he's not getting paid money, he gets to beat the shit out of a 1%er, which I think maybe improved his mood a little bit. But outside of work, this guy it doesn't seem like he has a lot going on for him. He's still close to who is, I think, one of his former teammates, but who he also happened to marry at one point in time. But of course, that didn't work. They got divorced, but he still meets up with her, to talk about old times. Like they still have a somewhat cordial relationship, even though they're divorced now. And, once upon a time, she was known as a Venge Lady because names, but now she's just Kendra. And they have this, experience where they'll meet up at the diner and they'll talk about kind of life. And I mean, you get the feeling that both of these people feel like they're hella washed up. They just don't have anything working for them. And they just spend most of their time golden yearing everything, talking about the past, which is heartbreaking, right? Like, and that's something that nobody wants to get to. Like we don't want to, we don't want to spend our entire present reminiscing about what used to be and just bemoaning the fact that we're still alive, which is kind of what it feels like. What these characters are, they're just kind of living, they're surviving, they're not enjoying anything, and they're not experiencing anything. So one fine morning, our guy here, this person who used to be an Avenger, went by the code name Damager. He's escorting one of the young ladies to the doctor because that's part of his job. And she's super into it. She's very sweet. We're drawing the illusion to Sin City, so there is this very much Marv homage to the relationship that he has with this young girl, and the way that he thinks about her, although he's not in love with her, so to speak. And while he's sitting there waiting on her, he's looking around and he sees a billboard, and the billboard's for this new TV show, called something stupid like The Call of Will. It's new series on February 14th, Hug Plus. And it's just it rubs him the wrong kind of way, because he's like this, all these happy young heroes, this shiny, gloss of Americana is just, it's just bullshit. It's not the way that it was supposed, that it was. It's a lie. And he starts thinking about some of his old teammates, so he goes and meets up with them. There is this bar, it's called the Oneshot bar, that he and some of his former teammates meet up with to drink a few beers, and again golden yearing, like all of this guy's existence is talking about the past in some context. But this place is cool because it's the only place him and his buddies use their old code names to kind of to talk about life. So as they're sitting here, and this is getting close to the end of the story, inside this bar somebody meets up with him, and she's a special agent from this organization called the Experimental Armament Recovery Unit, the EARU, so to speak. And she comes to him, and she's basically enticing him to come back into the fold a little bit. She's like, hey, you still got something of ours? And he's like, no, I don't. Like, no, I gave back all of that years ago. I don't have that, any of my gear or anything like that. And she's like, no. You've got something. If you think about it hard enough, you'll figure out what it is. And she essentially offers him a job. And again, this dude is, he just wants to, at the end of the day, he's retired. He wants to live his life, and not get folded back into that. But he, as he sits and thinks about it, he's going to stew on it for a little bit. He's not sold on the concept. And he's not sold on the concept for a little bit, but he has this moment, because one of the things our buddy Damager does here, is he doesn't just moonlight as a bouncer to a strip club. He does what every C-list, D-list actor in our modern era kind of does, where he does the con circuit, and he loops into the con circuit, sits at a desk. He will sign comic books based on his exploits, based on the things that his, the fictionalized versions of the things that he and his team did for little snot-nosed kids who shouldn't be reading the work anyway, and charges a little bit of money for it. And that's where the story cuts itself off. And so issue 2, I think we're going to see this. I think we're going to see our boy Damager break a little bit, and we're going to see him dip back into the fold and jump back into kind of these clandestine activities that he was really, really good at back in the day. But he hung his hat up for a reason and was retired for a reason. So I think that's the plot. That's the main point. Matt, did I miss anything? Did I misinterpret anything?
Yeah, I think so. One thing I wanted to ask you about, you mentioned that he beats the shit out of a 1%er, but he doesn't do that.
What do you mean? So that was in the strip club, he kind of, like, the guy is just up, and you're talking about the guy who's harassing the.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, maybe I read the beat the shit out of it too. Maybe I read that the wrong way. So the way I saw it is the guy was up on the stage, and maybe he does just toss him out.
Well, just, what it makes a point to show is that he's not violent with the customers of this club. It shows him interacting with a few people that cross the line or too drunk, and it purposely shows him escorting them out calmly. And, when that guy gets up on stage, he pulls him off stage and the guy gets smart with him and he just like, yeah, let's wrap it up. It makes a point to show that he's not violent to the customers of the club. And he seems to have left violence in his past altogether.
So I read that. So I'm looking at that page now. I can see, I see that. I see what you're saying now. I read that last panel in that page. So there's this moment to where this guy who has, this one percenter is just like, fuck you. I closed a $3 million deal today. And then that next panel, all it is you see his eyes squinting and money floating down. The way I read that is that he took him outside to the back alley, and maybe he didn't. That's the way I read that, but I could be completely wrong. I 100% see kind of where you're coming from with that, but that's the way I took it, is that he grabbed this guy, he pulled him off stage, and he's not making a scene inside where the girls are working, but he took him outside and put him behind the woodshed for a little bit. But I mean, again, that's interpretation, because again, all you see in that panel, just for those folks who are listening, is, the panel beforehand is this guy holding up a stack of money, saying, like, who are you? You're nobody. I'm me. And then in this next panel, it's just black, and all you see is eyes with money raining down. So it's completely up for interpretation. I think your way adds a lot of context to this idea that maybe he's somebody who has restraint, a lot of restraint.
It feeds into, he's obviously depressed.
Yeah.
And that feeds into that, that image, as he's standing there watching this happen, this guy just throws money in his face, talking down to him. And he's just like, he's got the circles under his eyes of depression.
Right.
And it just matches up with his entire tone throughout the book. So, but I love the opening. What I was going to go to, the opening page, it was the best of times. It was the most extreme of times.
Mm-hmm.
It made me laugh out loud. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Little Oliver Twist to the 90s.
Oh my gosh, this is so. And those of us that collected comics through the 90s, that this for opening page carries a lot of gravity. To have gone through that and remembering what that was like. The way I just said that made it sound dramatic, but it was just a very interesting time. And the concept of this book is just really, it's interesting to me. I want to say funny, but once you read the comic, it's not funny. It's really, this is obviously a depressing story about people that have been used up and thrown away. So, you could make that parallel to a lot of things in the real world.
Oh, absolutely.
One, veterans. Two, any given professional athlete, things like that. People that are essentially used up physically and or maybe mentally, and then forgotten about once they've outlived their usefulness, as the saying goes. So yeah, I didn't know. I'd never heard of this publisher. I'd never heard of this creator. I didn't know anything about this book. So this was an interesting book to read, just going in totally blind.
Well, I'll bring you some of the Polar stuff that he did, because I think you'll really, really enjoy it. I would encourage you to seek it out. Because I've got I think 3 volumes. I think there's a few more that I don't have yet. It's so good, man. It is so good. And like I said, there's a Netflix movie that they made based on some of the work too. But you were saying, you talk about this, you were speaking about the 90s and collecting comics, and then the allusion to people being used up and thrown away. And you had mentioned obviously like soldiers who have had the same thing, but like focusing just kind of on the relationship to the context of comics and art. I think that's, I think it's so true. Like, as I was reading this, I felt like he was making a statement on specifically 90s comics art and where it stands today, and how it's viewed today. You have a lot of the, like Larry Stroman, some of these, like, obviously not the Todd Father, and you've got guys like Rob Liefeld and Eric Larson, all of these, like the main Image guys who were legendary, and our Jim Lee, who are still legendary, doesn't really apply to them because they got plenty of money. But there was a whole field of comic artists who drew this quote unquote extreme style because it was big in the moment, and it got them a lot of fame and notoriety in that moment. But within a few short years, those dudes just couldn't get work. The men and women, I shouldn't just say dudes, just couldn't get work anymore. And now you see a lot of them when we go to these comic, like, you know, I, before COVID, you could go to a Comic-Con and search the guest list or see who had tables in Artist Alley and just look up their stuff. And it's people who haven't published anything for, going on what, like 20 years now, 25 years, and they're still working this con circuit. So for me, getting to that last page and realizing what Damager does now, like I really do think that this is kind of Viktor Santos writing a really, really hyper violent, really fun, intriguing story that has this broader message that relates to the comics medium, specifically like the mainstream marketable comics medium, and some of these other artists that exist, and how that they are viewed today, and how they're kind of contextualized.
Yeah, of course, that also makes me think when this 90s extreme style hit, all your classic comic book artists couldn't get work. Herb
Right.
Trimpe is a great example.
Yeah.
John Romita Sr. is a great example. I mean, nobody wanted any of their work all of a sudden because it wasn't the new extreme Rob Liefeld style. And
Yeah.
and it is a Rob Liefeld style. I mean, everybody was aping Rob Liefeld. Jim Lee, Mark Silvestri even started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
All these Will Spertasio, they were all aping Rob Liefeld, which is not. I mean, it was selling. It was all doing well. That's frankly, it's smart business for them to do so. But yeah, there was the same type of fallout from the classic artists as a result of that.
Well, yeah, and I mean that kind of goes back to that conversation we were just having about house style, and that's one of the reasons I don't like it, because it does lead to a whole lot of people working outside their wheelhouse that wouldn't be the best fit for them, and it is almost kind of a copy and paste cookie cutter style. And on the other hand, I mean, the capitalist in me, which I don't proclaim to be a capitalist, but I mean the person who understands how capitalism works, like I get how that sells. Right now something's a little bit similar is happening in the comics market. You have the manga style that's picking up, and I mean you see a lot of people who are grabbing that and who have some originality to them. I mean, you've got guys like Daniel Warren Johnson, guys like Trad Moore, I am going blank, but she's doing these new covers now that are incredibly hot. She's kind of the most sought after cover artist.
Peach Momoko.
Peach Momoko. She's got her own style, but you're also seeing a lot of these folks who, if you look back at their work 5 years ago, they were very different. Now they're starting to, you could use the word ape, you could use the word be influenced by the phrase, this manga style, this really kinetic thing, because it'll sell, because people will grab it and buy it. But on some level, if you're not Daniel Warren Johnson, if you're not Peach Momoko, and you're just filtering the work because you think it's what the publisher wants, then I think you can feel that as the reader too, right? Like I think that was part of the problem with the 90s comics. I mean, comics throughout the ages, because this is an original thing. It also makes me think about Bill Sienkiewicz. Like when Bill Sienkiewicz first started out, he was a Neil Adams clone. And it was very obvious. It was like you could see it, and it's not that it wasn't great. It was beautiful, but he just it didn't have the energy and the authenticity that Neil Adams did when Neil Adams was doing his own work. And then you get Bill Sienkiewicz just going ape shit and breaking out and doing all of this multi-modic graphic design, insane stuff that he became known for, and that was where the authenticity lied. And so I think it's part of that. Like there's, as an artist, at least for me as a consumer, somebody who reads this medium, I need to be able to feel the authenticity that's being put down on the page and not feel like it's being, like I'm doing this because I wanted you to buy it. Like, because then it just gets stale, or at least in my opinion.
Well, luckily, I mean, right now there's never been easier way for a unique artist to get their work published. That's one thing that Image changed for the market for the drastically better. The launch of Image was, a double-edged sword. I mean, it was launched on the basis of this Rob Liefeld extreme wave, but once that wave settled on the back end, the vacuum that it created from the crash in the market, luckily made room for more varied types of artists than there's ever been. So yeah, there's definitely still house styles out there, and I think there's still room for it. I don't see any reason not to have a house style. It's like it's the same kind of reason like the Rolling Stones were always mega successful, is because they had a style and they stuck to it. Same kind of thing is going to work with a corporate publisher, but that's fine because that's what that is appropriate for that market and what's made it be successful. But you can go to these other publishers for really unique looking stuff, and the big publishers do unique looking stuff occasionally too. They're doing more unique looking stuff than they've ever done in their past as well.
Mitch Garrett is a good example of that.
Yeah, there's all kinds. I mean, we could go on and on about.
Oh yeah.
But it's the overall is the 90s thing is funny to talk about and fun to look back at, and it's real easy to beat up on. But it also was. I mean, it was a legitimately new way to make comic books fun and exciting. It was just gasoline was dumped on that fire and it just got out of control and ran into the ground. And it's unfortunate that some artists just started aping that Rob Liefeld style, because going back and look at some of that work, you're like, man, how much better could this have been if he was just doing it his way?
Right.
When the way he did it in his earlier days. And I'm not going to name any names, but there's some of my favorite artists. If you go back and look at their early days of, like, say, Marvel, because all these guys came from Marvel, and then you look at their self-published stuff, it's not the same. It's not the same
at all.
Still good. It's fun. It's like, man, how much better could this have been if he just stuck to his own style and didn't try to make everything extreme? But
well, it's one of those things.
I bought it regardless.
It's one of those things I need to like write down and ask artists whenever we interview them. So some of these artists who have done or been asked to do different styles and stuff by editors, like, because I know exactly what you're talking about, and it doesn't feel like the artist, or at least doesn't read like the artist had fun while they were drawing it. And I think it's because, in my opinion, or what I guess an assumption that I have, is that when an artist has their style, I'm not saying it doesn't require effort, it does, but it's possibly more fluid and it feels more natural, and you can have more quote unquote fun drawing it, versus the amount of like energy and the amount of labor you have to put into controlling your pen to make motions and make marks and lines in a different style than what you want to.
Yeah, I totally disagree. I think they're doing the opposite and they're dumbing it down.
Okay. So
I mean, what they're looking back at that 90s style, that didn't take taming yourself, or that was the opposite. It was just big splash pages, and it was the opposite of all that.
Okay.
That was the thing. It was just surface level. It wasn't the storytelling craft of it that it was in the past. It was just, you could exchange any of these panels for another one, because it looked like that the pages were drawn with very little thought or forethought to the story or dialogue. And that's what everybody likes to make fun of it for, is that very thing. It's just surface level only.
Well, I mean, like that makes sense. I'm not an artist, and I think that comes through pretty clear. In my mind, I'm such a person who is dedicated, or for me personally, like I get into such a routine. Like I have such a specific way of doing things, whether it comes to like writing notes, or whether it comes to the way I read my books, or this, that, or the other. Like I get into a pattern, and like deviating from that pattern, I have to like hyper focus on it, even if it's something that's supposed to be simpler or should be easier. Like for me personally, I have to like really pay attention to what I'm like, if I'm doing something out of sequence or out of order, or if it needs to look like end up being different than than what I would expect it to originally. And that's what made me ask that question. But no, I mean, that makes sense. It's all like I said, I'm not an artist. It's one of those questions that I'm curious to hear from an artist's perspective, what they thought, especially people who worked in that era, specifically the 90s.
Yeah.
But I mean,
how willing they'd be, how enthusiastic they would be to actually talk about it. It's probably going to vary.
Oh no, for sure. But then it's now 2022, and we've got guys who take this 90s style. I mean, Viktor Santos is a great example. Michelle Fife is another great example, who have this like 90s style that is its own thing now. Like it's metamorphed to be something that's reckoned. Like Michelle Fife is the perfect example of that, because his style is so completely 90s quote unquote extreme, except it doesn't feel that way, but it exudes it. I just love looking at his stuff.
So you classify this as 90s style?
No, I think it has some of it. Like you said, I think you can see the influence of Frank Miller. I think you can see the influence of I mean, there's a ton of influence in this. And I just went blank. I said his name earlier. Darwin Cook. Sorry. Yeah. Like that's very influential here. But I think it is referential, purposefully so. I never thought of Viktor Santos as quote unquote 90s in any of his other stuff. It wasn't until I saw him drawing characters that look like they were Youngblood-esque. Like if you look at that first cover, you see a person who might be the Max in the back. Like, again, I think that the Avengeress or whatever her code name was, the ex-wife, like she's meant to look like Domino. And so I think he's dragging a lot of that 90s style little epithets in there just to make to bring forth that nostalgia. I think he's trying to do to the reader a lot of what he's talking about in the book, as far as this golden earring and the nostalgia and like looking back on things. And I think this speaks to a lot of middle-aged readers now who tend to do the same thing with comic books. They look at the way that comics are written now, and it's not their cup of tea, and maybe they don't understand it, and they just they wallow in how better it was way back in the day. But I think he's flipping it on his head, if that makes sense. I mean, I think there's a lot of meta commentary in this, but I mean, me, I read meta commentary into everything. So.
I thought it was funny that the where he works is called the Fire Girls from Heaven Strip Club instead of like Exotic Review or something like that. It's just Strip Club.
the ponytail.
Yeah, it's like they put Strip Club right in the title of the place.
Boom. Oh, he just wanted you to know. He just wanted you to know. So, well, man, I'm really glad to hear that you enjoyed this. Any chance this is going to find its way to your pull list?
Yeah, I want to see where he goes with this. But it's certainly not an uplifting book so far. It's like, gosh, dog, this is a depressing story. But and I'll tell you what this reminded me of, like page to page to page reminded me of, is Darren Aronofsky's movie The Wrestler.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, yep. This feels like he took the movie The Wrestler and turned the main character from a wrestler to a 90s comic book character. I mean, straight up feels like an adaptation of that movie, which I love.
I did too. I do. Mickey Rourke at one of his best roles.
Oh gosh, absolutely.
I mean, just stunning work as an actor. Like watching Mickey Rourke come out of that movie, and we're going to digress a little bit, but and then go and do Iron Man 2 was just such a disappointment, because we had just gotten The Wrestler, and I'm like, okay, this is amazing. We're fixing to get Mickey Rourke delivering this level of like, thespianship in a Marvel, and then we got Whiplash. Really, get the fuck out of here.
I thought Whiplash was the best part of that movie.
Oh, I know it was that movie, but that just speaks to the dumpster fire of a movie that was. Still my least favorite Marvel film of all time.
That's funny.
Oh, it's so bad. But no, so it's going on my pull list here too. Fingers crossed. Let me put it that way. Because, and this is where I'm going to get to where I was talking about earlier, where I'm going to bitch about Comixology. So this is, Behemoth Comics, not a big known publisher. We didn't pre-order this because I don't think either one of us saw it coming. I don't look at I don't, I mean, and this is, shame on me, but I don't look at Behemoth when I flip through the back catalog. I mean, I glance over it, but I don't pay attention to it because, there's a few small publishers like that where I've looked at them and it's like, okay, this is cheesecake and that's just not for me. So I tend to gloss over them. Apparently, I need to pay more attention to Behemoth and probably a company like Source Point Press, and there's a few other ones, but didn't pre-order it. Our comic shop got only a few copies of this. I didn't get one. I went to the shelf and I put one in Matt's box because Matt likes to read physical, I think, more than I do. Like that's a more important thing to Matt. So I did the brotherly thing and let him have the physical copy. And I went and was just going to do what I do and get on Comixology because it's simple, right? Like Comixology's got a great reader. My laptop folds back and it works as a tablet, so I can read it just fine. Except that, of course, this was the week that Amazon rolled out their quote unquote update and immersion, assimilating Comixology into fully Amazonian bullshit territory.
Womp womp.
Yeah, where they got rid and just killed the Comixology app, killed the Comixology format, and they folded it into fucking Kindle. And I hope to God they fix it. Like the Comixology app originally, before this past week, it had its problems, right? But it was fairly user friendly. Everything was just kind of right there. The way that you could, you had different options to read it. If you wanted to do panel view, if you wanted to do single page, double page, like it gave you options. It was fairly user friendly. When you paid for it, you bought it, it was right there. Dude, with this new thing, I don't have a Kindle. And so I guess I have a Kindle reader app on my computer. I don't know, but bought it. Number one, it took me 15 minutes to find out where the hell it went to. I had to dig into Amazon.com to find out recent orders and purchases and specifically the Comixology window of it, and then go to it and click on it and then click read now. And it pulled up to a different website. It's just stupid. It is not functional. It is not fluid. It is not intuitive at all, which I think websites need to be. It did not give me any of the options to read this in its own, in a way that made any sense, which I like to read page by page. So, you just click the arrow and it goes to the next page. I had to read this in the landscape that is my computer screen. It showed me both pages. Of course, it had to minimize it so it could fit everything in there. Didn't give me the options to zoom in on panels. It gives you a really stupid version of panel view where it walks you through panel by panel, but I hate that with a passion because in order to really read comics, I think you need to be able to view the entire page in order to kind of understand what's going on. That's part of the format of the medium, right? It just didn't give you any of that, man. It is so unbelievably bad. I hate it with a to where it's very much so going to diminish my digital comics reading. And I was reading a lot more. I was reading a lot more stuff that I can't get at my local comic shop, things that I missed. I'm going to have to pay more attention to previews, I guess. But man, I just hate it because it was so good for what it was.
Yeah, surely I can't help but believe this will be fixed because as sales are all automatically going to plummet as a result of it. And what it's also going to do is it's really going to make people be much louder about their reluctance to buy digital because you're at the mercy of the platform. And this is a great example of that. I mean, if you're buying digital on the regular, now all the books you want to go back and look at are in this terrible format that is really not user friendly. So it's going to make people think, well, maybe I'll go back to buying physical or I won't buy at all, which is probably more likely because they're buying digital for a very specific reason. So it's the damage of this is going to be more than just an inconvenience. Some people are really going to lose. It's going to damage some people's livelihoods and future livelihoods because of it.
Well, and from a legal aspect, it could get them sued. I mean, so somebody mentioned this on Twitter. This is not a Caleb, I didn't notice this by myself, had a little help, but Scott Snyder, very, very prolific writer, big platform. A lot of people follow him. He just signed a big deal with Comixology to produce it's got almost an exclusivity contract with them. I mean, he's still doing his Substack stuff, I think, too, but he signed basically an exclusivity contract with Comixology. and it's going to destroy his sale. Like, it defeats the purpose of that contract to the point that he might be able to get out of that contract. Like, he might be able to sue them for it because it's going to diminish his ability to get a return. Like, it undermines the entire thing. So,
Yeah.
man, I don't know. Like, but I mean, I'm not the world's biggest Scott Snyder fan. So, I mean, it's not really any skin off my back. I do because I'm an empathetic person, I feel bad for him because you just had this giant leap in your career, this new thing that you're going to try out. And all of a sudden, like, because Amazon won't let Kindle die, they just destroyed your marketability. Like, that sucks.
Well, it'll be corrected. It's just,
It's got
the bottom
to.
line. It's just a matter of time. But this is one of those instances where it never ceases to amaze me how incredibly short-sighted, is it a kind way to put it, but stupid things a mega corporation can do. It's like, you've got billions of dollars invested in a thing like this, and this is a very simple screw up that could have been avoided so easily. This is something that could have been avoided so easily. And there's endless examples of this, that the incompetence that exists in the level at the levels of these mega corporations is just amazing to me.
Well, and just the last thing before we move on and talk about happy things, but like the fact that it wasn't necessary at all, like the senselessness of it.
Yeah.
I signed on to Comixology through my Amazon account. I bought the Comixology comics through my Amazon account. They were already getting the money. It was already incorporated.
Yeah.
I don't understand. Like, it's senseless to do what they did. Just leave the thing that works the way it is and take your money. Like, just put maybe move a new link or something onto a new thumbnail onto your Amazon page, but it's senseless. It's so stupid. And it's like, I got viscerally angry. It ruined my morning comics and coffee. Just ruined it. I can't get that 15 minutes back. So, I mean, these are first world problems, obviously, but
indeed they are.
But I mean, that's we talk about the format on this show. We talk about comics and comics culture, and that is a big thing that's happened this week.
And really, this is not us being quote unquote Karens. My big hang up is, this is an inconvenience to us. The problem is the real economic damage it's going to cause the creators. That's my hang up. This is, our end of this is first world problems, not theirs.
No, theirs are legitimate real life issues that's going to undermine their actual economy and their yearly. I need to reach out to Justin Jordan. That's who I need to talk to. Justin is a genius about these things. I need to see if I can get Justin on the phone and get and bend his ear about that. If I get some time this next week, I might do that and see if he wants to jump on with us or something.
That would be interesting to hear.
Absolutely. Because he's very smart when it comes to these kind of things. But all right. That's me venting, getting it off my chest, my newly defined muscular chest. I
had to get this off my newly developed pecs, stronger than ever. As Caleb.
Oh no, I can't. I won't make the claim that they're stronger than ever. Like, I went to lean down and get something in the shower yesterday, and after leg day, and my legs just quit, and I couldn't get back up, so I had to sit down in the shower for a second. This is where I exist in the world. Everything hurts. Hey, I'm pretty sure I'm dying.
But you can't spell legendary without leg day.
I'm getting. Oh my god, that just hit me in the heart. That was the most beautiful thing you've ever said. Tell me about some other comics, brother. What did you read this week? I want to hear about it.
So my book of the week was actually the book that I mentioned for my on the menu for last week's show. This is from Aftershock, The Lion and the Eagle.
Nice.
This is issue number 1. It's by Garth Ennis, PJ Holden, Matt Miller, and Rob Steen. So this is a true to life war story, and it takes place in India, specifically East India, and it is about the English teaming up with the Indian Army, fighting the Japanese as the Japanese try to expand into that part of India. I'm not sure how many issues this series is. This one snuck up on me and I didn't know anything about it until I just happened to see it in the next week's previews. However, it is in this oversized large format, this big, this big format, kind of similar to what the Black Label books, some of the Black Label books are doing. And I've read some books that PJ Holden has done before, so I was familiar with him as an artist. And his artistic style fits very much into what Garth Ennis chooses for these war stories. It's a very real, true to life type of cartooning. It's it's not exaggerated poses. It's not exaggerated figures. Everything looks very lifelike, but very simple. It's not an over detailed type of work. However, this is a part of World War II that is very rarely discussed. We always hear about the European theater. We hear about the African theater, somewhat, mostly just due to Rommel. And then we hear a lot about the Pacific theater.
Mm-hmm.
But this part of the war is rarely discussed. I mean, and they mention that in the book itself, is that even the leaders at the time, and since this is the English army, they mostly are talking about Churchill. Churchill is talking about Hitler 90% of the time, it felt like. He does talk about the threat of Russia when it becomes appropriate. He does talk about Japan, but he's talking about Hitler mostly. Of course, frankly, Hitler was their closest threat, the most immediate danger. So
right.
That's not a fault. It's just an interesting, that's not me. I'm definitely not critiquing Churchill here. I'm just stating that, this is how it was at the time. And as a result of that, very few people know anything about or have had the chance to learn anything about the Indian theater, and myself included, because there's just not that much material out there. So this was really interesting for me to read, because I've read a lot of World War II stuff, a lot, and never anything about the Indian theater part of the war. And so, what it touches on in this book is the subtle racism that the English had for the Chinese. I say subtle racism because really what I mean by that is it talks about how they were somewhat surprised the way the Chinese viewed the brutality of the Japanese, because they're like, well, they're all Asian, so it was that kind of racism. Their views were surprising because they weren't the views of a white man or their fellow Indian soldiers, for example. They kind of lumped Asians all in together, is what is pointed out in the book, with no ill intent, I should say. It's just, that's why I say it's like subtle racism, and it points out in the book that like you're racist and you don't even realize it. So that was a very interesting thing to point out in the book. Garth Ennis has got a history of doing that kind of thing as well.
Right.
He's got a history of pointing out how racism affected government policy and war strategy. Doesn't do it a lot, but he touches on it in some places in a lot of these war books. And he's also a big fan of doing these war stories on aspects of the war, World War II, that most people don't know about.
Yeah, it's untread ground for the most part.
There's one story, I believe it was called The Forgotten Battalion, not the Lost Battalion, but he talks about these battles that happened in the war that were never identified, never talked about, because they were abysmal failures. So all these soldiers that died as a result of the strategic failure are not discussed because, frankly, nobody wants to talk about their failures. And it's a shame, because you have swaths of soldiers that gave their lives and they're never given their just due, like you would say the soldiers that fell on D-Day. The soldiers that lost their lives on D-Day are always addressed, because D-Day was ultimately a success. And these guys died as a result of this successful strategy. But Garth Ennis likes to point out the very ugly side, the side that, well, you don't talk about the soldiers that died as a result of your poor strategy.
Right.
But this book is all set up. This is all set up. They're setting, this is this English division with their Indian counterparts moving through India. And the Japanese don't make an appearance in this book.
Okay.
They're just set up as these very, very frightening soldiers that are extremely brutal. They make a point to point out in the book that if these same soldiers doing these same tactics were German, we would call them brave. But the Japanese, we call them maniacs or suicidal. But if these same type of soldier, these same tactics were taken on by, frankly, white men, we would call it brave. Like a bonsai charge is a great example of that. It's always like, oh, the maniacal, suicidal bonsai charge. Well, Garth Ennis points out, well, if a white guy was doing it, you'd call it a brave stance or whatever.
Yeah. How many times throughout wars have, generals ordered their soldiers to fix bayonets and walk into a meat grinder?
Yeah.
It's
Robert E. Lee's a great example of that.
Yeah.
But what it also addresses is that without a doubt, the Japanese, they viewed warfare different than anybody else on the battlefield during World War II. They, for example, the easiest example of this, did not value prisoners of war. They did not value prisoners of war. They killed everybody with very few exceptions instead of taking prisoners. The only time they took prisoners is when they felt it was absolutely necessary to what they were doing. When they did take prisoners of war, they treated them poorly, they treated them more poorly than any other army in the war, whether obviously American, German, anybody. They were brutal to their prisoners of war. It's amazing if you survived as a Japanese POW because they literally did not value your life. They saw your life as worthless.
Go back and read some of the Bataan. I mean, I know you have, but just for the listeners, stories from the Bataan Death March. It'll.
I mean, and that's another thing. It's also an interesting, and I have no explanation for this. The fact that the brutality of the Nazis on the Jews is been discussed at length, but the brutality of the Japanese to the Chinese and to the POWs has not really ever been discussed. And they did things as hideous, arguably more so to Chinese POWs, Chinese civilians that in the areas that they conquered. They did disgustingly brutal and vicious things to men, women, and children that the Germans didn't do. It's easily arguable that the Japanese were much more vicious to their enemies, whether they're civilian or not, than the Nazis. But anyway, this book sets all that up. So going into the second issue is where it feels like we're going to get into the conflict part of this. And I'm really looking forward to the conflict part of this book because of how these Japanese war tactics are going to be illustrated in this story. I'm really looking forward to, because, Garth Ennis he makes these stories, he teams himself with artists and makes it to make it as graphic, as viciously graphic as reasonable to the story, because he is all about the horrors of war. And he has said many times he's just in awe of how everyday human beings operate under the most extreme circumstances a human being can be put under. So it's going to be very violent. It's going to be very graphic, because that's frankly the point of the story, is how these people handle how different personalities handle those things and come out the other side. So I'm really looking forward to the rest of this story, because Garth Ennis is just so good at creating these narratives, and he always teams himself with artists that are good at it as well, but they're always the artists that draw and cartoon in a very realistic manner, not lifelike. I don't mean like photo like,
No,
just
true,
unexaggerated.
Yeah.
Not like the characters aren't over muscular like a typical comic book character type thing. It's not that kind of thing. It's a very simple pen and ink type style that would I think very, very well served to be in black and white.
Yeah. Well, because at least what I think you're talking about, the way you're describing it to me, is it shows them as actual real life human beings, actual men and women, not superheroics, not larger than life. I think, as far as war books go, Kelly Williams painted a book called A Letter to Joe a few years ago. And I think he did a really good job of showing soldiers as, these are not like, dudes with rippling muscles and 8-packs. These are really scared people who are just like you and me, who have, gone through boot camp, but they're just thrown into situations that no human can fathom.
It's not celebrating it's not celebrating the war experience as an action movie. It's not doing that. It's horrific. It's psychological and physically horrific, and it's not glorifying it.
Right. No, it's it doesn't make a martyr out of this, and I think that's important. So man, I need to get my hands on this book. I'm glad you told me about it, because it sounds like something I would really, really enjoy. And I didn't know about it before you were talking about it, other than, last week. So that's, to take this war story from, and pull it out of like this almost Anglo-Saxon mindset that we view war.
It's still Anglo-Saxon. I mean, this is from an English point of view.
No, for sure. English point of view. But it, like you said, the book is so entrenched in talking about the others.
What would be fascinating is to read a World War II story from a Japanese artist. That would be. I would. I'm sure those exist. Maybe they don't.
Well, like you said, a lot of people don't like writing about the stuff that they lost. Unless of I was thinking about this while you were talking. The Alamo comes to mind, but that was used as a propaganda tool. That was used to turn these people into martyrs, and all they did was waste their lives. Essentially, I mean, they were just destroyed. Like they were, they didn't push anybody back. They didn't hold anything. They were overran and slaughtered. Sheer weight of numbers was against them, but they were turned into martyrs. And that's really the only time I think you see that in war stories. At least I'm not as well read or well studied about these things as you are.
Yeah, that's a topic I won't get into.
Right.
To say that.
Well, all right. Well, dude, thank you for telling me about that book. I need to go ahead. I would read it on Comixology, but that's shit now, so I'm not gonna. You want to jump in the Wayback Machine with me?
Please.
Let's do that. So I want to take us back to 1941 of all places, since we're kind of in that era. You kind of segued me with the period, so to speak. But what I want to talk about in the era of 1941 is specifically life in America, featured around two characters who showed up in an anthology series back in the day that was called Clue Comics, and those characters are Nightmare and Sleepy. Now you've seen these characters show up recently, you've seen the characters show up recently in the Cain and Abel book that we talked about not too long ago. That was one of, I think, both of our we really enjoyed it. It was in my top 10 books. But you also see Jeff Lemire's Skull Digger and Skeleton Boy homage them. So between those two things, I wanted to reach out and find some more information about the source material, because I really enjoyed both of those versions of this. And there is a company, I say company, but it is GW and Anna Land Comics, who put out this is actually GW and Anna Land Comics number 1722. This company is dedicated to taking public domain stuff and republishing it for modern audiences to be able to read. Folks like me who are like, oh, this was really cool, this really obscure, strange thing. So they get together and they find versions of the art, the best versions that they can. They scan them in and they reproduce them into these, soft cover floppy trade forms. And so through a little bit of internet sleuthing, and basically it led me to Amazon again, to find this, but I was able to order it and get my hands on it. And it's really cool. And I'm really glad it did, because it's a full color reprinting of the first 12 issues that these characters showed up in that Clue Comics from 1941. And the characters, it's so cool. Like, I'm geeking out over this. So the characters were very much meant to be another version, at least a type of version of Batman and Robin, because that had blown up on the scene, and everybody was trying to recreate it, right? Like, everybody was trying to find a way to do that. So this is a story about Bob White and his young friend Terry Wake. Now, Bob White is a traveling wrestler, and his kind of shtick is that he wrestles in a tweed suit. Like, he shows up and is this kind of everyman, but he wrestles and he fights in a tweed suit. And so they travel from town to town. And then Terry is his manager, and Terry's a young kid, man. Like, he's drawn to be a teenager. The dude can't like, I don't know how old he's supposed to be in the story, but he can't be more than 16. Very, very young man, and no clue who this kid's parents are, or why he's traveling around with a strange man who travels around wrestling. But yeah, they're doing their thing. And they, in the first issue, their debut issue, which was in, I'll have to look it up. It was in Clue Comics number 1, actually. They showed up in the first issue. They come to this little kind of lazy town that, it's not a booming metropolis, but it's a bigger town. Like, it's not New York City, but it might be like Scranton, Ohio or something. And they're all set up. They're going to wrestle, and they're just worried about getting paid. It's going to be just an event. They're going to move on to the next town. Except that in this particular place, the mayor and the people who have set up the organization and set up the event, they've asked for a little bit more of theatrics. And our boy Terry, the sidekick, he's had an idea, and he's going to bring out he has had these spandex costumes, form-fitting costumes designed and purchased for both him and his boss, as they're gonna wrestle and stuff. So kind of bring, it is a way for the writers to shoehorn in. I should say the writer being Alan Mandel, and Dan Barry was the artist, for them to shoe in the look of superheroics, right? Like, this idea and invent and debut this look that these characters are going to have. So he's got these costumes in his briefcase, and they're getting ready to go to do their press conference or whatever, and they're going to show up and they're going to have these costumes on, and it's going to be a big deal. Like, the theatrics are going to be wonderful, and it's going to give them a pay bump and all of that. Except there's a villain who wants to spoil their plans. Can you believe such a thing would happen? This villain is known as the Checker, and he's literally, his costume is a giant checkerboard. And why he's called the Checker, why he's checkered themed, the book does not explain it. It doesn't make sense other than the fact that it's there. But he jumps in, and he basically kidnaps the mayor. And he brings the mayor up to the top of the tower, to the penthouse of the city hall or whatever. And there's a chessboard set out, and they're going to play chess. And somehow through we don't know at the beginning of the story, but through magic, through something, mysticism, every time the mayor loses a checkers game to the Checker, a landmark or a building full of people around town will disappear. And it will take everybody inside the building with them. And so he orders, number one, the Checker comes out and he orders everybody in the city, like, you've got to go to your bank right now. You got to get out a year's worth of cash, like whatever you made last year. I expect you to have that, because you are going to ransom off these places. As your mayor loses and he puts all of your people in danger and these buildings disappear, you've got to pay the ransom for the city to me. in order to make these folks reappear. And of course, the whole city just goes into chaos, right? Like this is crazy. Like this, and again, this sounds really, kooky and funky to us reading it in 1922, but this was 1941. And one of the great lines in this book is as Nightmare and Sleepy are listening, they hear this come over the radio. They're like, oh, this must be another one of those Mars radio shows. Like they're alluding to the fact that, like, in very contemporary history to this being written, relative contemporary history, you get attack on, you get this radio show that threw everyone into a frenzy.
War of the Worlds.
You get H.G. Wells like causing chaos, and so they're
not H.G. Wells causing it.
Well, right, but you know what I meant. But you get this chaotic kind of nonsense because people weren't used to the format of radio, and so they talk about stuff like that in this book. But Sleepy, being the younger of the two, gets this idea. It's like, man, we've got to do something about this, because, well, actually, at first, Sleepy's like, bro, we got to go. Like, last train out of Dodge. Like this place is nuts. We didn't sign up for this. It's going to cost us money. Obviously, we're not getting paid. Let's skedaddle. Nightmare's not so keen on that. He's just like, no, dude, we can't just leave. Like, we got to help. Like, we have skills, we have talent. We gotta, we're not heroes, but we got to act heroically. And so they get to where they're going to go do something. And then I guess Nightmare sees a bunch of mobsters and folks with guns who are helping out the checker. And then he's like, oh yeah, I don't want to die. So maybe you're right. Let's go. And so they go down to the bus station. They're going to catch the last bus out of town that's traveling, except the bus gets the bus station and the bus get disappeared. That's the next spot. The mayor loses a game of checkers to the checker. And so now they're inside this bubble. They're inside this disappeared place, and they have to work their way out. And of course, the story has some inconsistencies, because in every other situation, it's the people on the outside of whatever has disappeared that has to pay the ransom for whatever building. Inside this story, the villains, the checkers henchmen, starts taking the ransom from everybody inside whatever building, like the bus depot that has disappeared. And he demands, a donation from everybody, like a year's salary at the time, which was, even for rich people, were like $2,000. And they don't, like, Sleepy and Nightmare don't have that kind of cash, but what they have are muscles, and not much else. And so Sleepy whips out these costumes, the debut costumes of Nightmare and Sleepy, and they put them on. And fortunately, at least for Nightmare, his costume is mostly black, except for the skeleton, except for the outline of a human skeleton that runs the length of his body, that just so happens to glow in the dark when they kill the lights. And so that's what the lights go out, and all of a sudden, all you see is this skeleton starting to beat these mafioso type thugs, these henchmen, within an inch of their life, until they find and they work their way out. By the end of the story, of course, our heroes save the day. What they realize is that there is no magic. This was all a contrived contraption. The city was built on a bunch of mechanical lifts, because this was supposed to be the city of the future, or like a program city of the future, that whenever the bomb raids would start, they could, like, sink down into the ground and disappear. Like they were going to be protected from bombs and stuff like that. And one of the mayor's own people, spoilers from 1941, guys, one of the mayor's secretary and his brother were actually the bad guys, and they were the ones who orchestrated all this as a get rich quick scheme, and they were going to skedaddle out of town. But man, this was incredibly cool. This was super fun to read. It's a little bit dated in the vernacular and stuff that is used, as you might expect, but it's super fun. Like it surprisingly holds up really, really well. I'm not somebody who can go back and read a lot of golden age stuff. I do from time to time, but I don't, it's hard to read because a lot of it just, it's super dated. It doesn't hold up. The plots are very contrived. They're very simplistic. The medium was new. These were not the best storytellers in the world.
Well, they were it was strictly a child audience.
It was disposable medium. But the thing is, that's what's funny about this. This is not particularly written for a child audience. I genuinely felt like this was being written for adults. Like they were making the joke about War of the Worlds. There are some jokes in here that are, could arguably be about sex. It kind of does the Shrek thing where it hides an adult joke in a child, like in a child appropriate line. There are some very, there's some comments in here that are made about bankers and about the upper echelon of society and how they are economically negligent and mistreat the little people. So there were some very adult themes in this that I was not that aren't there when you go back and read like Golden Age Superman, Golden Age Batman and stuff like that. Like, so I was pleasantly surprised. I'm going to enjoy reading the hell out of this. The second issue gets into upside downtown, where all of a sudden the people, like, gravity is apparently waning and people are doubled over and they're walking on their hands and stuff. But of course it's all basically circus actors meant to so it takes these, it does a Scooby-Doo thing where it like brings in this supernatural element that they have to fight through, and it ends up being just this guy dressed as a skeleton and a sidekick who have no superpowers, just beating their way to finding the bad guys are just everyday average people with a little bit of science and a little bit of plot armor and suspension of disbelief, who are doing these crazy big things. Delightful as hell. If you can get your hands on it, I highly recommend it. Like I said, it comes from for those at home, just type in GWANDANALAND comics and it'll pull up the whole series of these. Again, these are all reproduced, but they're in the public domain, so it's legal, it's free. No, the book's not free, you got to pay for that, but it's legal to be published, and you're not ripping anybody off by pulling these off somewhere. So it's totally legitimate. You get, these are all recolored, which is the only thing that's a little bit of, oh,
that's kind of a bummer.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it is to a point, but I don't know if you can, as I'm holding this up to the screen, like, it's not incredibly jarring in the sense that it takes you out of everything, but you can tell it is recolored because these are scans. The lines, these are scans of really old books. The lines are not as crisp as they probably once were. But I mean, like, look at this cover of, I guess this would be issue number 2. Like, this is just incredibly good stuff. And as far as like comic art at the time, this is incredibly forward-looking comic art. This would have been novel for what we saw. It looks nothing like equivalent comics from the 1940s that I've ever seen. Incredibly well done by Alex.
Well, I'm sure that, as far as the lines go, I'm sure the lines were never crisp, I would think, because it was printed on the most lowest of low quality of paper.
Right.
And that's what I really, I'd appreciate taking a look, see what it looked like on that. And that's why it bums me out if, it being recolored, is I would like to see it represented as closely as possible to the original. Is it on glossy paper or satin paper?
I would say it's on satin paper. It's got a little bit of a gloss to it, but not much. The paper is a little bit rougher. And the scans. So, Matt, I say it's recolored. I don't see how it could be anything but recolored. But in saying that, like, if you look at the scans, like, you see the browning of the original paper around it. So I mean, these really are just full color scans of the original pages that are printed. So I mean, you kind of see the ephemera, but like, again, I can't imagine that a comic would have been this crisp of colors. But I could be completely wrong. I could be 100% wrong in that. These may just be really, really well preserved. So, like, I mean,
is that a print on demand book?
No, this came. I don't know if they have it in print on demand, but this basically is in the same format as a trade paperback. It's a little bit bigger. I'd say it's closer to being magazine sized.
You can usually tell if it's print on demand by looking at the last couple of pages.
Let's see. I don't think so.
So does it talk about the creative team?
Not a whole lot. I had to go do some Google sleuthing to really find out anything about Alan Mandel and Dan Barry. Didn't find out a whole lot about them other than like these were folks who were kind of just in-house guys that they went to create these stories. And so it's actually got me looking into more of their works.
Are they credited on the comic itself?
Yeah, they are. I say that they are. On the cover, On the covers, no, they are not credited on the covers. Where they're credited in this particular book is underneath the cover, so you can kind of see where they I think they typed it in.
So in the original work, there's not a credits page.
No, I did not see one, and I don't know if maybe they took it out. But again, I don't recall that being common practice from any of the Golden Age stuff that I've seen.
No, it wasn't. That's why I asked, because I've read a lot of the old EC horror stuff, the EC crime era, and the vast majority of those, there's no credits whatsoever. And a lot of those books, people still don't know who drew them, let alone wrote the stories. They're completely, who created those is completely lost to history in a lot of cases. It's just the big mainstream crime and horror artists that were there on the regular throughout the years. People know about Jack Davis, easy example of that.
Yeah.
And then there's others, but the only reason we know about them is they just stayed with it so long. They couldn't be ignored. But some of these other artists that came in, we'll never know who did it.
Well, and there's some, like you said, you mentioned Jack Davis. There's some Jack Davis, style in this book. You see a lot of that. Some of these covers, I think they're a little bit more cartoony than what you would see on an EC cover, but there's definitely that sketch and texture, that sketch style texture that you would see on some of the EC covers. Really line heavy, and especially in the shadows. But man, I'm going to enjoy this. I'm 4 stories in so far.
So did Lemire reference that in his stuff?
So I'm going to tentatively say no, because I have not seen it, but I also have not read a ton of the back matter of those books, and I don't know if he maybe has mentioned it or spoken about it in the back matter. But it's obviously that's where he's pulling his Skull Digger and Skeleton Boy from. Like, that's very, very clear. And originally I thought that those were just meant to be like something that he had created, because he's Jeff Lemire and he pulls out everything from the ether, that he had just created as kind of a Batman and Robin homage in that book, which was really a Dark Knight Rises kind of reference. But it wasn't until I read the Cain and Abel one shot and read the skeleton, the Nightmare and Sleepy story in that, and read the back matter in that where it talked about them, that I realized what this was. And that set me down a whole path to really learn about these guys, and the history of it, and check out some of these public domain stories.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad I did.
Those old Golden Era books, those I don't want to say underappreciated, but the lesser known Golden Era books are interesting to read as time capsules, if nothing else. It's just very interesting to read those as time capsules, and I've done a lot of that. Frankly, some of them can be really hard to read.
Yeah, and see, that's kind of what I was expecting, because again, these were. Again, you get into some of them. These, number one, they weren't widely published. They weren't widely distributed. They, had a limited readership, and they were very, very disposable. And so they didn't last. And again, this was not. You didn't have people who wanted to be comics artists and comics writers. You had out of work writers and out of work artists who went to comics to make a buck and pay their bills while they, did other things, kind of famously. That was never I shouldn't say that. For a select few, it was kind of where they wanted to be, but for most it was not.
In this one, something that, when I go back and read all that Golden Era stuff, something that stands out to me, oh my gosh, huge, is every single sentence is ended in an exclamation point.
Yep.
Every single sentence.
But one of the things that I found interesting is that this book didn't do the Stan Lee thing, where it's, you see the action in the panel and then the narrator describes the action in the panel as if you don't have eyes.
No, that was a Stan Lee thing. Yeah, that's for sure.
Well, so they did some of that in the early Superman books too, and some of the early, like the Golden Age Batman stuff, that was kind of a thing too. So it's not, but it's very much a Stan Lee thing. And yeah, man, but like I said, I'm going to go down the catalog and see some of these other books. But this was just a lot of fun to read. And it was really interesting in the fact that it doesn't read like a book that's 80 years old now. It has its moments and it's very dated, but it's not so dated that you feel like you're biting into like an antiquity. Like obviously things have changed a little bit now to where this is of its time, but not so much that it makes it unbearable to read or just boring.
Yeah,
it's
well,
fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean everything we're reading right now will be looked back of as at its time,
right?
To a certain extent. Just about everything is presented in the style of the day.
Mm-hmm. Well, and everything, like we reference pop culture now so much. That was another cool thing that this book does really well. It does reference some pop culture, but maybe just by happenstance, the pop culture that it references, like War of the Worlds, like the HG, like there's an HG Wells reference. There's a Citizen Kane reference in here.
So there's two different Orson Welles.
Yeah, references. Yeah. So so I think luckily the pop culture references that it make are globally recognized now. And when I read some books today, when they mention like a Lady Gaga song, or they'll just talk about a TV show that's popular as just a blip, I'm like, no one's going to know what that is in 20 years. Like don't do that. But yeah, man, that's my book of the week, Nightmare and Sleepy, the complete Nightmare and Sleepy collection, originally published by the Clue Comics, and they showed up in 12 issues. Sadly, they changed up Nightmare's costume at one point to make him look more like a superhero and not just a walking skeleton, and it's not good. But again, shout out to GW and Anna Land Comics, who are doing a fantastic job of reprinting these public domain things and do a really good job of saying, hey, we totally only do public domain stuff, and that's all we're kind of interested in. If something happens and we reprint something that you think is not public domain, we don't want to step on anybody's trademarks, please contact us and we will remove it. Nice. So like they're just doing it for the love of what it is. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, nice.
Well, all right, brother, how you feel?
Good.
Got some comics talk out of your system?
I did.
Yeah, makes me feel good on a Sunday morning. That and a little bit of coffee will make my whole day. But we're not through yet. We still got business to attend to, right? Yep. We still got to talk about next week. What's coming out next week that you are going to bring home?
This looks interesting to me. From Marvel, celebrating 50 years. It says Ghost Rider #1 from Benjamin Piercy and Corey Smith. So Ghost Rider is a character that I've never really been super into. The character got really hot in the 90s, probably the peak of the character.
Pun intended.
Right. However, I'm a big fan of Benjamin Piercy, so I'm really interested to see what he does with the Johnny Blaze version of Ghost Rider. Says that he's taking Ghost Rider back to his roots. So I'm looking forward to this just because it's one of those characters I've never paid a lot of attention to back when he was at the character's peak, as I said. But due to the creative team, including Corey Smith, I want to see what this is all about.
I will probably do what I normally do and pick up the first issue just to see how it treats me. Again, like I'm kind of like you, not the biggest Ghost Rider fan. I actually didn't realize that this was going back to Johnny Blaze. I kind of just figured that this was Robbie Reyes, Ghost Driver. So, which I don't dislike. I just don't like the stuff that he's being used in right now. So, that's nice. Check that out. I will check that out with you. So I'm going to grab a one shot next week, and this comes from Image Comics. And this one shot is written and drawn by the same person, and that's Mr. Cena Grace, who is a kind of getting to be more of a well-known queer writer, queer artist, very, very representative heavy. And so he's putting out this book called Rockstar and Softboy. That is the name alone. Pull me in. Yep, Rockstar and Softboy. So this is the story about two best friends and their antics in Hollyweird, California. Rockstar has planned the greatest house party ever as a mean of lifting roommate Softboy's spirits because Softboy's feeling a little down in the dumps. But things take a gnarly turn when the dreaded party animal shows up to make a mess of things and dredge up long-held secrets between the two BFFs who are supposed to share everything. So that, like, Cena Grace's stuff can be, irreverent, funny. It's really gay. So it really queer, I should say. It's not just gay. And like the cover alone cracks me up because you just see this. I don't know if you can see it through the glare. But you see like the Rockstar is just like laying in a seat surrounded by stuffed animals, just not giving a shit. And then Softboy's got like gloves on and cleaning. I'm assuming that's who they are. That could be backwards. So, and Rockstar is drawn to look a lot like Cena Grace. So I think there's some of his self put into these books, but I'm going to check that out and would encourage everybody to do so as well. So
nice.
All right. Well, I feel like we've shot our bolt and it's time to land this plane, so to speak. Again, I love doing this every week. It's kind of the highlight, especially of my Sundays. Talking comics is one of my favorite things, and doing it with you makes it kind of special. And, we're still looking forward to getting Craig back on the mic with us. We're not sure when that's going to happen, but he sends all of his love to the folks listening who also probably miss him about as much as we do. He just wants y'all to know that he's still around. He's just handling his business. So we send out a lot of love to his family as they're going through kind of a hard time. But regardless, we will be back at the same time, same place next week. If you miss us during that time, go check out those social media footprints that we have that I mentioned earlier. We're at SFG Podcast on Instagram and Twitter, and you can join our Facebook page, a little group where we talk about things and talk about whatever you want. Would love to see you there. And if you have any comments, questions, concerns, shoot us an email, southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com. And until next time, I guess you should just go forward and love some comics.
Word.
Do it.